King Charles just made a shocking announcement. In a jaw-dropping turn of royal history, King Charles III has officially removed Prince Andrew from the line of royal succession, a move that hasn't been seen in modern monarchy. Citing disgrace, scandal, and the integrity of the crown, the king signed into law a bill that effectively erases his own brother from the future of the British throne. The public is stunned, insiders are whispering, and royal tradition has been turned on its head. Is this justice or betrayal? One thing is clear: no royal is untouchable anymore. The monarchy just crossed a line it can't uncross. The envelope that changed everything. It began with a courier's arrival at Clarence House early one morning. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, sealed in red wax, and bore the insignia of the Attorney General. It was placed directly into the hands of a senior aide, who ascended the grand staircase and passed it to King Charles III without a word. Inside, a 23-page legal opinion that would shake the monarchy's foundation. The question it answered had never before been asked in modern times, because no one dared to ask it. Can a reigning monarch, with Parliament's approval, remove someone from the line of succession without their consent? The answer, delivered in exacting constitutional language, was yes. With historical precedent, statutory authority, and royal prerogative, such an act could be taken, provided the legal scaffolding was sound. Citing examples from as far back as the 17th century, and invoking the sovereign's role as protector of the institution, the document made one thing clear: succession was not immune to disgrace. Charles read it once in silence, then again. Alone in his study, he stood at the window and stared into the palace gardens, clutching the final page in his right hand. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily toward 11 a.m., but time felt irrelevant. Outside, London pulsed with routine. Inside, the monarch weighed an act that could split his family and secure the throne's future. He did not speak for nearly half an hour. Then, finally, he rang the bell for tea. From that moment, the wheels began to turn. The letter would be copied, archived, and coded. Confidential meetings were arranged. No aides would speak of it. But among the few who knew, a single phrase echoed: "The envelope has changed everything." The king, once known for caution and compromise, had been handed a weapon. Now the target had to be chosen. But this wasn't theoretical. The need for action had a name. The royal scandal that had lingered for years, ignored, downplayed, and privately mourned, now demanded resolution. Prince Andrew, once the nation's war hero, had become the monarchy's greatest liability. The king would no longer protect him. The era of silent shame was over. What came next would be deliberate, public, and irreversible. Prince Andrew. For years, Prince Andrew, Duke of York, had been the royal family's most corrosive contradiction. His public disgrace began with whispers and escalated into a torrent. His association with Jeffrey Epstein, his baffling BBC Newsnight interview, and finally, his out-of-court settlement with Virginia Giuffre. Each chapter tarnished not just his name, but the entire royal brand. He paid a reported £12 million and yet never admitted guilt. The public saw through the silence. The stain spread, and the palace stayed mute. Despite being stripped of military titles, HRH status, and public duties, Andrew remained eighth in line to the throne. It was a paradox: publicly shamed, yet institutionally protected. That contradiction now drew fury. Headlines decried the double standard. Editorials asked how someone with such a past could remain tethered to royal legitimacy. The answer was always the same: tradition. But tradition had become a shield for disgrace, and that could no longer stand. A new documentary emerged, one filled with court filings, contradictory timelines, and unsettling testimonies. It aired to millions and reopened wounds the monarchy had hoped would scar over. Even longtime royalists expressed outrage. Downing Street received more than 12,000 letters in a single week. Within the palace, aides whispered of collapse, of a monarchy that protected its own, even at the cost of its integrity. The Prime Minister demanded a meeting. "This is no longer a family issue," she said. "It's a constitutional crisis." In private, Charles had wrestled with loyalty and legacy. His mother had shielded Andrew. Charles would not. Now, with the Attorney General's brief and public support behind him, he was prepared to act. The monarchy could not be allowed to decay from within. It was not just Andrew's scandal. It was the message his continued presence sent. It had to end, and the king would be the one to end it. But before laws could be passed or decrees issued, Charles chose one final, fateful gesture. A letter, personal, private, but firm, would be hand-delivered to Royal Lodge. In it, the king would give Andrew a choice: surrender quietly or face public removal. No ceremony, no spin. Just two brothers, one holding the crown, the other clinging to its shadow. The king's ultimatum. The envelope was hand-delivered by a royal courier just after 8 a.m. Andrew, unshaven and brooding, tore it open in front of a stunned valet. Inside was a single letter, written in the king's own hand. There were no pleasantries. It was direct. "Abdicate your place in the line of succession, or I will see it removed by Act of Parliament." The tone was cold, the message final. There was no invitation to discuss, just an ultimatum and a countdown. Charles had enclosed polling data. 73% of Britons supported Andrew's removal. He cited the weight of public opinion, the rising scrutiny, and the Crown's duty to modern standards. "This is not punishment," he wrote, "but preservation. The monarchy must endure. Your presence threatens." That the letter ended with one final line, underlined in ink: "You have 7 days to respond." Andrew paced for hours, ranting to aides, threatening legal action, and cursing the entire family. But no call came from the palace. The silence was deafening. For 5 days, Andrew refused to comply. He considered going public, contemplated a press statement, even discussed legal resistance. But behind the rage was fear. He knew what Charles could do, and that the public would cheer it. On day 6, after a sleepless night, Andrew signed the attached declaration under protest. It was a surrender, bitter and reluctant. The monarchy had spoken, and this time it would not look back. The document arrived at Buckingham Palace before noon. Charles reviewed it without expression. The room remained still. "File it," he said simply. That afternoon, government lawyers were summoned. The king had extended a hand. It had been slapped away. Now he would act not as brother, but as sovereign. And the next step would change the monarchy forever. Behind closed doors. The summons was discreet, but its meaning unmistakable. By early afternoon, a convoy of blacked-out vehicles rolled through the gates of Buckingham Palace, carrying the monarchy's most powerful advisors. Inside the cars sat Prime Minister Lydia Harrow, Attorney General Robert Linley, Lord Chancellor Miriam Astor, and 4 senior Privy Councillors, men and women whose names rarely appeared in headlines, but whose influence traced centuries of royal decision-making. The meeting was called by King Charles III himself. It would not be recorded. No phones, no minutes. The setting, the 1844 room, lined with portraits of monarchs who made hard choices. George VI, Elizabeth I, even Edward VIII, who once surrendered a crown for love. At the head of the table sat Charles, flanked by his private secretary and a single guest scholar, Dr. Margaret Blackwell, the nation's foremost authority on constitutional monarchy. She began without preamble, her voice sharp. There is precedent for removal from succession. Not for scandal alone, but for conduct that undermines the public's trust in the crown. She cited 3 legal pillars: loss of public confidence, breach of royal duty, and disqualification by conduct. Past cases, obscure but real, bolstered her claim. Prince Ernest Augustus, in 1919. Nobles erased during the Act of Settlement 1701. And while no living royal had been struck for personal disgrace, the law did not forbid it. The survival of monarchy, she concluded, relies not just on bloodline, but behavior. Heads nodded. No objections were raised. The path forward was clear and unthinkable just months prior. By sundown, the decision was made. The Succession to the Crown Modification Act 2025 would be drafted, narrowly written to apply only to cases of sustained conduct injurious to the integrity of the crown. The king gave his approval with a single phrase: "Let us proceed." Outside, London continued in twilight routine, unaware that inside the palace, history had been rewritten in secret. The monarchy, once bound by inheritance alone, had gained a new standard: fitness to serve. But the monarchy could no longer hide behind mahogany doors and velvet drapes. What had been decided in silence would now face the roar of democracy. Parliament would be the proving ground. The king had laid the foundation. The law would be the hammer. And for the first time in living memory, the House of Commons would be asked, should the crown purge its own? Parliament takes over. 3 days later, the House of Commons was standing room only. Prime Minister Harrow herself took the floor, her voice steady. "The time has come," she began, "to uphold the dignity of the crown by ensuring the line of succession reflects the values of modern Britain." The bill, Succession to the Crown Modification Act 2025, was formally introduced. Its language was clinical: to exclude from the line of succession any individual whose conduct renders them incompatible with the responsibilities of royal service. Debate began and spread like wildfire. Over 3 days, arguments thundered across party lines. Some feared overreach. What if future kings used this power to eliminate rivals? Others demanded it go further. But the core consensus held. Prince Andrew could no longer be seen as a potential heir to the throne. Even royal loyalists like Lord Avery of Sussex admitted, "He is a stain we can no longer ignore." The mood was resolute, the symbolism vast. This was about legacy. At 7 p.m. on the third day, the vote was called. MPs filed into lobbies, journalists held their breath, and the public waited. Final count: 486 in favor, 82 against, 47 abstentions. A staggering mandate. The chamber erupted, not in applause, but in a hush that felt heavier than celebration. Across the hall, in the House of Lords, the bill passed with less drama, but equal weight. Legal scholars called it a tectonic shift. The monarchy had survived, but it had not emerged unscathed. The palace issued a statement just after 9 p.m. His Majesty acknowledges the will of Parliament and reaffirms his commitment to the integrity of the crown. No further comment. No mention of Andrew, but the message was unmistakable. The royal family was no longer sacred by default, and the public had spoken with one voice. Accountability must apply, even beneath the crown. Now all that remained was the signature. One final act of monarchy. A stroke of ink that would sever centuries of entitlement. The man once known as Heir Miles Andy would vanish from royal destiny, not by scandal alone, but by the written will of sovereign and state. And the king, as brother and monarch, would make it so. The stroke of the pen. At 11:17 a.m. in the Blue Drawing Room at Buckingham Palace, King Charles III sat at his writing desk with the bill before him. His hand hovered briefly over the parchment. Royal assent, once a formality, now carried immense symbolic weight. For the first time in modern history, a reigning monarch was signing away the inheritance of a sibling, not to deny birthright, but to uphold the throne's survival. With one signature, Prince Andrew was removed from the line of succession. There were no trumpets, no photographers, no press corps. Just the scratching of pen to paper and the soft rustle of legal parchment. When it was done, the king exhaled and closed the folder. "Send it," he said. Moments later, the official update was posted on the royal website. Andrew's name disappeared. Quietly, clinically. The public found out via a 9-word statement. The Succession to the Crown Modification Act has received royal assent. There was no ceremony, no emotion, just finality. In Royal Lodge, the news came like a thunderclap. Andrew, watching the broadcast alone, reportedly stood up and shouted, "He actually did it." Aides said he stared at the screen for 16 minutes, unmoving. He wasn't just shamed, he was erased. Removed from royal destiny by the very brother who once shared a nursery with him. There would be no going back. The monarchy had rendered its verdict, and history would never see his name among future kings. Behind palace doors, Charles didn't celebrate, but he didn't regret. He had done what he believed his mother could not, and what the future demanded. The monarchy had not been broken. It had been reforged, and one man's downfall had bought its survival. The stroke of the pen. At 11:17 a.m. in the Blue Drawing Room of Buckingham Palace, King Charles III sat with the final version of the Succession to the Crown Modification Act before him. His signature would do what scandal, shame, and silence could not: erase a royal from the future of the monarchy. A ceremonial pen was presented, though there would be no photographers, no commemorative image. Just the monarch, the parchment, and the full weight of 1,000 years of inherited power. He signed without hesitation. The act was done. The monarchy had turned on its own. Moments later, the royal family's official website was updated. Prince Andrew's name disappeared from the line of succession, replaced by a blank space between Princess Beatrice and Prince Edward. A formal statement followed. The Succession to the Crown Modification Act has received royal assent. No mention of Andrew, no justification, no apology. The king had spoken. History would record it, but the institution would not explain it. Across Windsor, the silence at Royal Lodge was deafening. Andrew, once 8th in line, was now legally nothing, a noble in name only. Inside sources revealed his response was volcanic. He broke a decanter, screamed at staff, demanded a public explanation from the king, but the palace gave him none. No family meeting, no private audience. not even a call. He was not just excluded, he was exiled in plain sight. At court, whispers called it the Crown's coldest act in decades. But to Charles, it was constitutional surgery. His mother had loved the institution. He was willing to scar it to save it. In private, he told aides, "We are not here to protect each other. We are here to protect the monarchy." With a single signature, the king had ended an era of royal immunity. The reckoning was real. But Andrew's removal was not just symbolic, it was material. The loss of succession meant the loss of privilege, and the king was not finished. One more blow remained: the reclamation of royal property. The lodge, the last of Andrew's bastions, would no longer be his to keep. The monarchy was moving swiftly, and it would leave no trace behind. Fallout at Royal Lodge. The letter came by courier again. This one bore the royal crest and the coldness of eviction. Prince Andrew was ordered to vacate Royal Lodge, his sprawling 30-room residence near Windsor Great Park. He was given 90 days to comply. The Crown, it said, could no longer justify his continued occupation of a property tied to public funds. Instead, he was offered Frogmore Cottage, the former home of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. The irony was not lost on him. Andrew refused. He called lawyers, leaked to the press, and told friends he'd die before moving to Frogmore. But the king remained unmoved. Security staff were cut. Royal protection units were withdrawn. Maintenance teams stopped showing up. Bit by bit, the life of a working royal unraveled. The lodge, once a refuge, began to feel like a trap. And for the first time in his life, Andrew faced consequences without escape. Even his daughters distanced themselves. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, long defenders of their father, stopped appearing at public events with him. They were advised by aides to protect their personal brands and lean into public service roles. Beatrice accepted new patronages under the Princess of Wales. Eugenie was seen attending charity events alongside Prince Edward and Sophie. The message was clear. Loyalty to the crown now meant loyalty to its future, not to its disgraced past. Inside Royal Lodge, Andrew lived in dwindling isolation. Friends stopped visiting. The gates were padlocked earlier each evening. The man who once flew private jets, hosted lavish dinners, and stood beside Queen Elizabeth II on the Buckingham Palace balcony, now wandered the halls of an empty house, a prince in name, a ghost in relevance. Yet, even as Andrew faded from view, the monarchy rose in the public's estimation. The purge, brutal as it was, had worked. For the first time in years, headlines praised the crown's decisiveness. Support surged, particularly among the young. The monarchy had done the unthinkable, and the nation had noticed. Public opinion turns. Within 2 weeks of the royal ascent, the numbers were undeniable. Public support for the monarchy, which had hovered near 50%, rebounded to 67%, with younger voters, the traditional critics, showing a 12-point shift in favor. Editorials that once called for abolition now lauded the act as a necessary modernization. Even international observers from Canada, Australia, and New Zealand took note. The British monarchy had, for the first time in living memory, held itself accountable. The story dominated news cycles for 21 days. Commentators across the spectrum credited the king with bold, painful leadership. A particularly striking headline from The Times read, "Charles sacrifices blood to save the crown." Commonwealth leaders issued quiet statements of respect. One diplomat from Barbados, which had recently become a republic, said privately, "If they had done this years ago, maybe we'd still be listening." Legal scholars debated the implications. Some feared the precedent. Could a future monarch remove others for ideological or personal reasons? But others argued that transparency had been injected into a system long cloaked in myth. "This isn't tyranny," wrote one historian. "It's evolution." For the public, it felt like long overdue justice. For the palace, it was oxygen. Charles's reign, once defined by comparison to his late mother, had found its own legacy. Within palace walls, morale lifted. Staff, who had once whispered fears of dissolution, now spoke openly of renewal. William and Catherine, the Prince and Princess of Wales, became more visible, projecting continuity, modernity, and restraint. Charles had passed the test his critics said he couldn't, and in doing so, he had given the monarchy something it hadn't had in years: momentum. As the dust settled, a new vision of monarchy began to take shape. What had started with a sealed envelope had ended with a seismic shift in royal power. But this was more than a single scandal. It was a new doctrine. Blood was no longer enough. Behavior had become the true currency of royalty. A new royal era. In the quiet of his study, King Charles III reflected not with triumph, but with solemn clarity. This had been the most consequential act of his reign, a choice to uphold the crown by cutting away corruption. The pain was real. The scars would last. But for the first time, he believed the monarchy stood on honest ground. This was not his mother's monarchy. It was something harder, leaner, and, perhaps, stronger. Prince William stood firmly behind him. In private conversations with aides, he called the decision courageous and necessary. He spoke often of his children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, and how they must grow up knowing that royalty is not immunity, but service. Beside him, Catherine embodied the future, calm, capable, and unshakably dignified. Together, the Waleses projected a monarchy earned, not inherited. The new royal order took shape around a core team: William and Catherine, Edward and Sophie, with Princess Anne continuing her tireless service. The outliers, Andrew, Harry, Meghan, stood further and further from the frame. The message was unmistakable. The crown no longer tolerated controversy, it punished it. Future historians will mark this moment not as the end of something, but the beginning. A monarchy no longer rooted solely in lineage, but in legitimacy. And with the stroke of a pen, a brother lost his future. But a kingdom may have regained its trust. The monarchy will never be the same again. With a single signature, King Charles III did what many believed impossible. He cut his own brother, Prince Andrew, out of the line of succession. This was no quiet decision. It was deliberate, brutal, and publicly backed by Parliament, legal authorities, and a British public hungry for royal accountability. It wasn't just a punishment. It was a message. Disgrace has consequences, even behind palace walls. For decades, the royal family weathered scandal with silence and spin. But those days are over. In removing Andrew, Charles didn't just preserve the monarchy, he redefined it. What once rested solely on birthright now demands behavior, and that seismic shift could reshape the crown for generations to come. Prince William and Princess Catherine now stand on firmer, cleaner ground. The path for their children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, has been cleared of shadows. The public sees a monarchy willing to sacrifice its own to uphold its values. That matters. That restores faith. That is legacy. But make no mistake, this was not without cost. Behind the stoic statements and regal calm, the royal family has been torn from within. Andrew, once dubbed the Queen's favorite, is now a symbol of royal downfall. His exile is permanent, and his silence is deafening. The crown has spoken, and in doing so, King Charles has ensured that the monarchy's future won't be protected by tradition, but by truth.